In 1972, the entire Soviet chess machine was hell-bent on just one thing: stopping Bobby Fischer. But there was only one problem. He was nowhere to be found. After numerous of his outlandish demands were finally met, a flush of Bobby Fischer arrived in Reykjavik just 2 hours before the match was set to begin. Game 1 of the World Championship. Fischer versus Spassky. Spassky with the white pieces begins d4. Typical Russian style of play. This is going to be a long game and probably a quite strategic game. So you see Fischer, knight f6, built his whole career off this sort of system. Spassky, c4, might see an Imzo here, e6, inviting it. Spassky tries to stop the Imzo in here. We see d4, but then we back to knight c3, and we just transpose into sort of different system. It's a queen's gambit decline sort of setup called the Rogozin defense. We see e3 by Spassky, reinforcing his d-pawn and ready to get a light square bishop into the game and get castles quite quickly. Fischer quickly castles, getting his king at the center. We see bishop d3, again, putting a bit of pressure on the h7 pawn. c5 by Fischer, trying to challenge White's strong center here. Now it's almost unclear who's even better in the position. Spassky again, going to struggle to play e4 because the knight is pinned to the king. We see castles by Spassky, again, getting his king out of the center, and knight c6 by Fischer, getting one of his last minor pieces into the game. But the problem is, both of these bishops are pretty bad on the queen side. Black's light square bishop is going to struggle to get into the game, and so is White's dark square bishop. But if Black can manage to trade off his dark square bishop for this knight, they can get all of White's pawns on the dark square complex, giving him a little bit of a strategic edge in the position. So we see a3, but Fischer tries to slide his bishop back. Interesting move. Knight e2 played, and then we see d takes c4 Fischer. Fischer finally relieves tension in the center. It's about to kick off. So b takes c4. Now, White who captures with the bishop to keep the pawn structure intact. But the thing is, this bishop is very bad. It's staring at this e6 pawn that's quite frankly not going to be moving ever. See bishop to b6 by Fischer, getting the bishop out of line of fire of move like b4, and then d takes c5 played by Spassky, fully clarifying the center. So then we have queen takes d1, rook takes d1, and then bishop takes c5. Queens are off the board. This is basically an endgame now. Now it's down to precision. And if you try and jump out or get too antsy, things can end badly, as we see in the game. So we see b4 by Spassky, expanding on the queen side. And now, you might think it's a bit of an odd move, but any pawn push is 2 squares closer to promotion. So we see bishop to e7 by Fischer, bishop e2 by Spassky. Now, a bit of an attack gearing up on the king side of Fischer. Bishop c7 played, gets his last minor piece into the game, and then we see rook a to c1, getting a rook on the c file. There's a good pressure on this knight. If it moves, maybe rook could end up on the 7th rank. Could be a bit nasty efficient. So we see rook d8, knight e to d4, and knight takes d4, knight takes d4, and bishop a4 played, pressuring this rook. And now Fischer is one who controls the d file, which is the most important file in the position. So we see bishop to b3, bishop takes b3, knight takes, as Fischer obliges in the trade of bishops. So we see rook d1 check, rook takes d1, rook c8, and now the endgame is truly afoot. Now it's going to be a battle of who can get these pawns in, but as you can see, it's a symmetrical structure. Both sides have the same color of bishop, and both sides have the same pawns. So we see 4 pawns on the king side, and 2 pawns on the queen side. So very draw-ish position, so we'll see what happens here. King to f1, king f8, but to get kings in the game. King activity is imperative in the game. King to e2 played by Spassky, knight e4, rook c1, bit of shuffling here. Rook takes c1, bishop takes c1. Now the game's going to slow down because minor pieces, they're not quick like the rook are. So we see f6, knight a5, knight d6, king d3, bishop d8. Both players shuffling, trying to get the pieces in the best position possible. Knight to c4, offering a trade of knights. And we see bishop to c7. Fischer thinks his dark square bishop is strong here, but is happy to trade the knights because dark square bishop will end up quite strong. So knight takes d6, bishop takes d6, and then b5, relieving some of the pressure of this bishop onto the queen side. And with all the cameras flashing in his eyes, Fischer was a bit disturbed and thought he had a win here. He thought he could sacrifice the bishop if it's trapped to win and took these pawns on the queen side and had the red carpet unveiled for his h and g pawns to promote. So Fischer in this position plays bishop takes h2. It's one of the biggest blunders of Fischer's entire chess career, because after g3, it is almost known as the Fischer trap. In long casting positions, you can't take this pawn because this pawn comes forward, the bishop is trapped, and it's easy for the king to swoop back and recapture the bishop, which is what we see in the game. So Fischer here thought he had this idea, which is played in the game, h5, and after king e2, h4, trying to free up the bishop and get it to escape, we just see king f3. And you think, well, why doesn't Fischer Spassky just take this pawn? Because it's free. Well, the idea is, if Spassky decides to recapture that pawn, Fischer's bishop is now back in the game, and this is again easily drawn after a move like bishop d6, putting further pressure here, and then you can't get any play here. These pawns are all split. It's 3-on-3 and 2-on-2. You're not going to get any play here. So then we see king to e7 by Fischer. It's actually the best move in the position. A cryptic move, just getting his king into the game. Because again, Spassky can't take here. We see king to g2. Finally, that bishop is hit. It's going to be capped on next move. There's nothing Fischer can do. He decides to go h takes g3, getting some more pawns off the board. F takes g3. Spassky recaptures the pawn before taking the bishop. Quite principled there. And bishop takes g3. Fischer is forced to just sacrifice his bishop for the 2 pawns. Now, this easily drawn endgame is now just worse for Fischer objectively. Now, the engine is saying white has a slight edge due to the bishop, but from a practical standpoint, if you don't win out the piece, this is purely demoralizing. It's going to be hard to win this. So king d6, a4, Spassky is advancing his pawns on the queen's side, king to d5, bishop to a3. Now Spassky's in, he's infiltrated. He's using his advantage, because if you're up a bishop, you better use the bishop, you know? King e4, bishop c5, now Spassky defending everything and attacking at the same time. Just shows the power of the bishop in this position. These pawns are just weak and just out for the taking for Spassky. a6, b6. Now this pawn is an endgame liability. If this falls, this b pawn is going to be floating in a flash. f5, king to h4. Now Spassky is trying to outflank black's king and gets this g7 pawn. f4 played by Fischer. Trying to get some play, trying to uproot this e3 pawn, because if he's got these pawns on their own on the king side, this could be off to the races for Fischer. But no, e takes f4, king takes f4, and now Fischer's king is sort of box game at Spassky. But these pawns on the queen side are actually very strong for Spassky, because these pawns aren't going anywhere, and the bishop is the only thing that has play. These pawns are going to be stopped by white's king and bishop combo, because the bishop sees both ways, of course, and Fischer has nothing to play for now. He's just trying to hold on, not lose as quickly as possible. So king to h5, king f5, Fischer tries to keep some sort of opposition, but it's too late. Bishop to e3, after king e4, Spassky reroutes the bishop. After king f5, Fischer's just shuffling back and forth. He doesn't even know what to do. Bishop h4, Spassky direction, wants to maybe defend this pawn, maybe put some more pressure on this pawn on g7. e5 played by Fischer. Bishop g5, shuts down the roots of that pawn, also blocks white's g pawn as well. e4 played by Fischer. Bishop to e3, blocking the pawn. King to f6 played by Fischer, trying to keep an eye on his g7 pawn. King g4, king e5. Spassky's king cuts off all these squares, and the bishop cuts off these squares as well. Fischer is forced to either leave the defense of his pawn, or move his pawn here, further weakening his position. So Fischer plays the only move he has left, a5. After bishop to f2, still controlling this square, Fischer is truly in Zugzwang now. He has to play g5, and this pawn is going to be captured immediately. King takes g5, king to c4, and then king f5. Spassky's in. Spassky's just going to win all of Fischer's pawns. No one's going to be stopping these because Fischer has no pieces. He lost his bishop for that unsound sacrifice. King to b4 played, and then king takes e4 by Spassky. Spassky has won back all of Fischer's pawns on the king side. He's also a winner, truly gone now. King takes a4. Fischer snatches back a pawn, but as I already said, it's just too late. King d5, king b5, and the kings come in. After king d6, Fischer resigned the game here. He begrudgingly shook Spassky's hand and then stormed off, clearly upset with his play. Hope you guys enjoyed that video. There should be another video popping up on the screen YouTube thinks you're going to enjoy the most. Hopefully I'll see you guys in the next one. That video, I've actually got a cool thing for you. Studies have shown if you click on this video coming up on the screen right now, your ELO is actually going to improve by 15% and you're going to get a free Lamborghini. So if that sounds good, click on the video and watch that one as well.